We're taking a look at our dice simulator. So where did we leave it? I'm just going to run it. I guess I have to go into this one first. Here's our UI so far. We roll the dice. The numbers change. That's where we need to be. Is everyone in Java? Yeah. Right now we're just using text, but eventually we're going to use pictures. Now in Yahtzee, if you play the game Yahtzee, what happens is you can have up to 3 different rolls per set of, you have a set of 5 dice, you roll them 5 at a time. You can hold ones that you don't want to re-roll and re-roll some others. It's kind of like poker when you get a draw from poker, but you get to do it twice. And you're trying to get 5 of a kind. You know, a Yahtzee, that's kind of the idea of what you're trying to get. But we don't want to let the person playing cheat. We don't want them just to let them roll over and over and over again. We want to limit the number of times they roll to 3 before they have to score what they got in the roll. So we're going to add a new button to our interface. And it's just going to be a score button. Okay? We'll have lots more buttons on this UI, but for right now we'll just say score. And it will reset the roll button so that you can roll three more times again. So let's add that to our user interface. Now remember, we're relying on the UI builder from NetBeans. So that's here. There's a couple different views of that. It's really slow. Okay, so here's our design window, and again, this is kind of nice. You can just drag and drop things into it. What do we want to add to our UI? We want to add a button. So I might put it over here. And I want to make this smaller, just so you don't accidentally hit it thinking it's the roll button. We want to change the name of this button to the score button. So we call it JButton Score. It's a little bit more meaningful. That's the name of our... So I clicked on the code and then changed the name there. And then going back to the properties then, we want to check the I'm looking for the text that's on the button. All the way at the top? This one? Yeah, that one. Okay. Yeah, we'll call it just score. Okay. So that's what's going to say on the button. Yeah, so there it is. Score. I might make it as wide as the button above it, though, just to make it look nice and clean. Okay, so there's our score button. But now we want to create an event handler for the score button. What should happen when we click on this form? Well, we got some things to do first before we create the event handler. Well, first of all, we have to keep track of how many rolls we've done so far. So in the constructor for the frame, let's look at that dice frame, see if that's the best place for it. Now remember, in our constructor for the dice frame, we initialize the components, and that means get all the UI components ready to go in the frame. And then we created an array of buttons and then assigned each button to a slot in that array so that we could process the buttons in a loop. We also created a set of dice that we're going to use to populate the values in the buttons. So that's our constructor so far. We need something called something called num rolls. And we want to initialize that to 0. So the first time they're going to play this game, we want to start out, they haven't rolled anything yet, and that makes sense. Problem is we don't have a num rolls button or a num rolls variable anywhere. So we're going to make that a class level instance variable. And we'll put it down here. We'll say private int num rolls. And so now if we look back up here, it's not complaining anymore. So the first time they come in the game, the num rolls is set to 0. But then every time they actually roll the dice, we have to increment. And what increment means is to add 1 to the number of rolls. So where do we actually roll? J button roll action perform. That's the one that gets called when we roll. Instance variable was num rolls right there. How many separate rolls do they have? Now in Yahtzee, a turn is actually 3 rolls. They call that a turn. And we'll have to keep track of that too, but right now we don't need to do that. So the best place to count the number of rolls is in the event handler for the roll button, right? So we would say roll number plus plus. Oh yeah, sorry. What do I want to call it? Roll number or num rolls? Num rolls. I think that's better. So let's change that to num rolls. Well, I guess it is already. Okay, so we'll go with num rolls. I think that's better. So we add 1 to num rolls. But again, we're trying to limit them so they don't get more than 3 rolls. So we have to add an if statement here. And we can say this. If num rolls is greater than 3, okay, see if that makes sense. First time you do it, you get 1. Second time you roll, you get 2. Third time you roll, it's 3. So it have to be greater than or equal to 3. Because on the third one, we don't want them to be able to roll again. But how are we going to stop them from rolling? We need to shut off that roll button. So we do this. We say J button roll. That's the roll button. Dot. And it gives you a whole big list of things that you can do with buttons. Yikes, look at all that. That's just a button. Look at all the methods available. We want to disable it so they can't click on it anymore. Yeah, disable's not there. But they do have enable. Notice that enable has been crossed out. Same thing with this one. So what that means is, yeah, you can use those methods, but they've been deprecated. Deprecated. What does deprecated mean? Okay, so let's look at the word deprecated. Well, deprecation means that in the next version of Java, these methods aren't going to be there. This is Java 6 that we're coding in right now. In Java 7, these could go away. Right? So if you're writing new code, they're trying to tell you this is a bad idea to use this method, this enable method, because that's been deprecated. That means in the next version of Java, it may not be there. So what do we use in its place? Well, let's look at enable input methods. Maybe that's the one we need. What I'll do is I'll right-click on it and say Show Java Doc. And we'll see what that says. So here's what they say about enable. It says deprecated. As of Java JDK version 1.1, replaced with set enabled Boolean. So they changed it from enable, which is really a mutator, and they want to make it look like a mutator. So all they've done really is changed it from enabled to set enabled. And that makes sense because we want it to look like a mutator. We're actually changing whether or not it's enabled or not. So now we know why it was deprecated. And the one we put in isn't the one we want. So what they want us to do is to say, they even cross it out here too. They really don't want you to use it. And what do we want to do? Well, it asks us to put in a Boolean variable, or Boolean value. And Booleans are kind of strange. They're either true or false. It's named after this guy. His name was George Boole. He's a mathematician from the 1800s. He's one of the fathers of computer science, let's say. How can someone in the 1800s be the father of computer science? There wasn't computers back then. But sure enough, he's actually considered one of the precursors who created computer science as we know it today. Okay? So we're going to say set enabled, and we're going to say false. So in essence, what we're saying is disable the button. We say go. So here's our button. I roll it the first time, I get a set of numbers. Second time, third time. Now my roll button is disabled. I can't roll a fourth time. The only thing I can do at this point when you're playing Yahtzee is to score that roll. So then you'd hit score. But when you hit score, you want to re-enable the button because you just put in your score and now you want to get back to the next turn in Yahtzee. Okay? So we're going to have to add an event controller or an event handler for the score button. How do you do that in NetBeans? Go back to your user interface, and all you need to do is double-click on the score button, and it will create a default event handler for you, and that's the click event. So I'm going to double-click on score, and notice how it automatically put in a event handler for me, and it takes you to that part of the code. So it's really quite slick how this works. I remember back when there was dinosaurs on the earth, I'd have to type all this in with no help at all. What do we want to do here? Well, we want to score at this point, but we don't have a place to put the scores yet. So we just want to enable the roll button and then reset the number of rolls to 0 so we can start over again. J button. Get this right. J button roll dot set enabled, and we're going to set that to true this time because we need the roll button to be active. So let's try this, and you'll note that there's a problem. So here's 1, 2, 3, it's disabled. I hit score, that enables the roll button. I hit roll one more time, I should get 3 and I only get 1. Okay? I scored again. I'm trying to get 3 rolls. I still only get 1. Okay? So what else do we need to do here so that we get three rolls? Anybody? Yeah, we kind of have to set the number of rolls back to 0. Right now it's 3, and then you do it again, it's 4, and that's more than 3, so it still disables it every time now. Lets you roll once, but nothing more. So we say num rolls, and we set that back to 0. It's like you were starting over again, starting a new game. So now when we run it, we get 3 rolls. 1, 2, 3 gets disabled. I score. 1, 2, 3, score. See that? So now I get 3 rolls, and then every time I score, I get another 3 rolls. And that's how you play Yahtzee. That's kind of the pattern. Okay. Next time I'm going to bring in the Yahtzee game, and we're just going to play Yahtzee. Everybody in Java 2 gets to play Yahtzee. The reason I do that is so that you can see the game being played and then think about, okay, how do I make this an automated computer program to play the same game? I'm still working on my Yahtzee artificial intelligence so that you can play against that, but I'll keep working on it this summer. All right, so that's it for Java 2.